Hello, welcome to Season 9 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. The theme of this season is 100 Years of Horror. We're going to watch two horror movies from every decade, from 1920 to 2020, in chronological order. We want to see where horror came from, how it's changed, and maybe even make some predictions about where it's going. If you want to see the full list of movies we'll be reviewing this season and follow along, then check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
We are recording our second episode of 1940s.
We are. And I may or may not have had to restart the podcast because I said it was the first. And yeah, anyway. Second movie from the 1940s was I Walked with a Zombie. And after doing Bride of Frankenstein and Wolfman, which were both sort of those classic sort of universal horror movies, this one did not feel like it followed kind of the same arc of increased quality in movie making and technology around the movie making. It was a little bit of a step back, and I know that it was an RKO radio picture and not a Universal picture. So I think maybe it didn't have quite the money behind it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. I thought, I didn't think the video quality was as bad. I mean, it doesn't get much better than the Wolfman.
Yeah.
Because that was so clear, but I didn't think it was that bad. It still reminded me of a movie from the 60s, but you could just tell, just from these early films, you can really tell a big studio backing, huge studio backing, I think, to the other films. It's just, there's definitely quality-wise was a little bit different. There was kind of a different flow. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the movies from the 20s as far as the storyline would have gone, I guess. But it wasn't the zombies that you expect in the 60s.
Yeah, for sure. And this one too was interesting to me because it was kind of a new story. I had heard of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but I had never watched it. But everything else that we've done so far, I've at least been aware of the main character or generally known the story about it. But this one I had no background on, no idea what to expect. And like you said, it was a totally different take on zombies than anything we've watched before.
Yeah, and I think that's where we kind of I got burned a little bit picking out the films because, I was going through by the decade, and I saw Zombie. Yeah, I saw it was 20 years before, Night of the Living Dead, and I was like, oh, okay, so let's see what maybe his influence was, just trying to figure it out. And I think I kind of got bit a little bit by it, hoping that they would be a little bit of the same. But then I realized if they were, then we'd be talking about that movie instead of Night of the Living Dead.
This felt like a totally different type of movie than Night of the Living Dead. Yeah. This one had zombies that were more steeped in voodoo and witchcraft and sort of curses and sort of that sort of paranormal world, as opposed to more of the zombie virus that's spreading by them being aggressive and biting each other. Yeah. Yeah, it was a different take on it for sure. It's just crazy to think how far zombies have come from this to 28 Days Later when they're super terrifying. Not that they weren't terrifying back then, but it's just crazy terrifying. You put even a Night of the Living Dead zombie, but you put any of the zombies before 28 Days Later, and it's that's nothing. We can deal with that. But with this one, it was focusing on the voodoo and the black magic and all that, and it it was an interesting take for sure. I mean, a little bit of inspiration if we ever try to write a zombie film, I think. Yeah. Well, I will go ahead and introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we will get into it.
Sounds great.
I was going to say into the brain-eating details, but this is not that type of zombie.
There's none.
All right. In 1943, RKO Radio Pictures brought us I Walked with a Zombie. When a nurse from Ottawa named Betsy is hired to care for a sugar plantation owner's sick wife on the island of St. Sebastian, she uncovers a world of voodoo, forbidden love, and the walking dead. Though it received mixed reviews after its original premiere, I Walked with a Zombie has stood the test of time and is now regarded as a classic horror masterpiece. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video. I kept that short because this movie was short.
Very short. Hour and
Your
8
turn.
minutes. Loved it. The word zombie is related to an African word nazambi, with just Nzambi, which means God. The serpent, the Legrand zombie, was the father of Laos, or other gods, and appeared in the shape of a python. So that's where the word zombie initiated from, supposedly. Did you know October 8th is World Zombie Day?
No.
There are basically two theories of the origins of zombies. So where zombies come from. This is brought up for this film because, a cursed person dies and returns as a zombie is one of the options. You obviously have the black magic spell included with that, so they don't have to technically die. Anyway, the other one is a person contracts a virus or is exposed to radiation. So it's like black magic or radiation. Not that bad.
So the two options for becoming a zombie, just so I'm clear, are
3.
Something supernatural or something natural.
Yes.
Okay.
Mummies are not usually regarded as zombies. I just thought kind of fun. Because zombies are in constant state of decay, where mummies are deliberately, physically preserved.
I mean, they could still be the same thing under the hood, don't you think?
You damn right they can. Don't matter what you are under them wraps.
Yeah.
According to zombie lore, the only way to kill a zombie is to damage its brains or cut its head off. It's facts for the future. Because viruses are not independent living organisms and need living organisms to reproduce, a zombie virus could be considered a misnomer. How do you say that?
Misnomer.
Misnomer, because zombies are generally thought to be dead. Now here is the last fact, and I think it's a fun fact. I think it's an interesting fact. Some people theorize that zombies prefer the taste of human flesh, in parentheses, if they can taste anything, because warm human flesh may have to do with the zombie virus needing fresh DNA or some parasitic microorganism receiving from some form of nourishment from live blood cells. You ever think about that?
No, because I'm not a nerd.
Yep. So those are facts that we have on zombies. I didn't really go into much facts on this movie. Couldn't find a ton, but I really wanted to kind of touch base on zombies, and we'll do a little bit more as the season goes on.
Cool. Appreciate it. Yeah, so to your point, I could not find anything at all about this movie, just as far as like information. And so going into it, I had no idea what to expect. And I kind of like that. It's fun to approach a movie with like totally fresh eyes. Like I feel like going into The Bride of Frankenstein, for example, I had these really, really high expectations because that's always been hyped up as like one of the best movie sequels of all time and so on. And then I was kind of disappointed by it because my expectations were so high.
Yeah. I think so. I think that kind of helps. That's one thing I've tried to start doing with these movies. Sometimes it's hard if the movie's kind of boring to not do research like
while you're watching
during.
Yeah.
Trying to kill two birds with one stone. But I feel like part of me is like I just want to know a new story, like with I have no idea about, and this was one of them. Like I've seen the pictures just in research of zombie films. Like I've seen some of the pictures, like the one of the zombies in the middle of the night shot that you see, but that was really all I kind of knew about it.
Yeah, and so going in, I didn't really know what to expect as far as like tone. Like, was this going to be like a super dark and foreboding thing, or more of like a horror comedy, or what are we getting into? And I feel like the tone was set very appropriately in the opening credits, where at the bottom it said, "The characters and events depicted in this photoplay are fictional. any similarity to actual persons, living, dead, or possessed, is purely coincidental.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty funny for the 40s, you know?
Right. That's one of the things I did read was that was put in there, obviously, ironically, for the chuckle. But yeah, I thought it was pretty funny myself.
Yeah. And then it kind of opens with, I guess it was Betsy saying, I walked with the zombie. If you'd told me I'd say that a year ago, I wouldn't believe it. And she almost sounds like kind of whimsical and not like scared at all. So it was just sort of weird to open the movie with like the funny thing in the credits and then her not establishing like a feeling of terror. And so that's weird to me for a horror movie. But I do also think that the first, I don't know, all but about the last 10 to 15 minutes of this movie just kind of made you a little bit off guard for how intense it got at the end, which I feel like is a thing that horror movies do a lot now too.
Yeah, it definitely, it set the stage. However, the problem that I think you could run into doing that though is you could lose audiences.
Oh, for sure.
The attention, because it's like, it maybe it's just for us now because like we're used, my favorite horror movies is the one that gets to the action fast. Like I've talked about that hundreds of times. Yeah. But it's sometimes it's a little hard to stay focused because you're like, wait, am I like, is this just a freaking romance movie?
Yes.
Or, right. Like some movie like that for some reason they have zombie in the title, Yeah. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, but it was close to like really lose my attention. I'm glad I stayed for the end, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for an hour and 8-minute movie to risk losing your attention, that's just shame on you. Like they should have been more engaging with it. When you have it that edited down and that little time to work with, you should be able to move fast and keep it like really engaging. And I feel like this one definitely didn't towards the beginning. Yeah. But I did learn that people were still riding on pirate ships in the 40s. That kind of blew my mind.
That was a cool shot too, like that pirate ship. Yeah. I'm not going to go off topic, but I really want to talk about that ship. You know what's funny about the beginning, the very beginning of it? It honestly kind of reminded me of like a Christmas movie because of like the snow in the background.
Yeah, in Ottawa. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to thinking like, oh, that's one of the things that like entices her to go to the island because she's getting snowed in, and you go to where there's palm trees and all that. And it was something that I don't think was like a huge statement that they made, something like slight that they added in, but it was like that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and there in the beginning, Betsy was sort of narrating and moving the story along that way. And it really felt like most of the movie was kind of told from her perspective and meant to make you like care about her. Like she was the one experiencing the terror. She was the one you're supposed to empathize with. But then again, at the end, that was not at all where the horror was. To me, this one really did feel like it took a pretty big turn towards the end, and the turn worked. But going back through my notes and thinking about like all of the movie leading up to that, I was like, they really kind of spent a lot of time in the wrong places, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Because, like, you already knew Betsy survived, and she didn't seem all that, like, torn up about it. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's very true.
But this one, I mean, so the idea is she goes to be the nurse for this plantation owner's wife, and the wife has become a zombie. And even when the doctor's there talking about it, she asks, like, what a zombie is. And he's like, a ghost, a living dead, also a drink. Ha, 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 ha. Like, he's hilarious. But then you find out Mrs. Holland had a fever. It burned out her spinal cord, which I didn't know was a thing. And now she's basically a sleepwalker who can never wake up. And that part was really interesting to me because it was describing what was happening purely in terms of, like, medicine.
Yeah.
Whereas the people that lived on the island, like the native inhabitants, would describe it more like spiritually. And so for a movie in the 40s to be sort of like sticking those things next to each other and having this like weird scenario and showing how like one side has a very confident like scientific explanation and the other side has like a very confident supernatural explanation, that's kind of interesting for a movie this old.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably like like a representation of what they did with Night of the Living Dead, in that that's more so a like how will humans deal with in a sense of panic or whatever. There's the actual thing that they talk about, but with this, it's kind of the same concept. It's more so like the human nature, like what's human nature in that, and you have religious people and the scientific community that sometimes butts heads, and like you're saying, for them to be talking about in the 40s that's probably the biggest horror in it, and the fact that I'm sure they could have, I don't know about laws back then, but I'm sure they would have been murdered or something for talking bad about trying to make people think,
Yeah. Well, and I think it was probably very deliberate to show not the whites as the ones that had the more spiritual beliefs, or whatever. Like, it just, anyway, there were some things about this movie that didn't age super well in that regard, but there were some really good scenes though. Like that one where Betsy and I guess Jessica was her name, go for the walk at night, and they go through that field, and then there's that random guy with the bugged out eyes and no shirt, and he's just like standing there like a scarecrow, and you think he's like frozen, but then after they walk away, he just turns and slowly walks off into the field. That was creepy AF, and I loved it.
Yeah, because you just put yourself in that position of like walking through a field, you come across it would just freak you out, and especially like when they shine the light kind of like on him. I don't know, it's just a weird, like, intense moment that you don't know what's going to happen, and that could be from our current influence of zombies, where we think like, oh, is he going to attack them, or what? But or like jump out at them or something. But no, it wasn't the case. But it still was just as creepy, in my opinion, just from, like I said, putting yourself in those shoes of walking through that field, and
for sure. Yeah, and I kind of liked that it was, I don't know, a little bit of a different take. Like, I haven't seen a lot of, like, voodoo horror movies, and especially not in some, like, exotic Caribbean location, Like, everything about that felt kind of fresh to me, just in that it doesn't feel like a thing that's been done a billion times at this point. So I liked it from that perspective, but the story, again, felt kind of convoluted to me. And I also wasn't like super pulled into it enough to go back and like rewatch and try to sort it all out,
Yeah, I don't think it was like a bad watch. I don't think it was a great one. Like you're kind of saying, like it had good bits and pieces. I feel like even though it was an hour and 8 minutes long, it still felt longer.
It felt way longer
from the storyline aspect. And I actually watched it multiple times. Just from like half-assed, watched it the first time, and wanted to, and so I was like a little bit more familiar what was going on the second round, and for me it wasn't necessarily one of my favorites, but I had no hate towards the movie when I was done watching it, which I thought that's an interesting take, and this was done early on. Like, this isn't a zombie movie post 1968,
right?
This is something that came before the popularity of those, and you gotta definitely give credit where credit was due. That this movie influenced tons of other horror films out there.
Yeah, I only had one other thing in my notes before we get to kind of the ending part. Did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, so the last thing in my notes before that was Jessica's acting's pretty on point.
You're damn right. I could act like that, man.
Just stand there and be quiet and don't react to anything.
That's my
I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah.
But
I could do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So anyway, we talked already about how the ending was kind of the big highlight of this movie, or the thing that made it worth watching, or that kind of grabbed your attention. And in the end, the mom is like confessing, saying that she asked the locals to curse Jessica, and then the doctor says that the fever actually did it, and the mom's being deluded by her own mind. But in the background of all this, there's like this weird voodoo ritual with a doll taking place, and it seems like they're trying to like pull, like you kind of get the idea that the doll represents Jessica, and then they're trying to like pull her out of the compound via the doll, and then she's like leaving the compound. And you're like, well, that's weird. Like a weird, kind of overlap, because this whole time you've had what's real? Is it the scientific explanation, or is it the more like supernatural explanation? And then that scene, and Paul's following her out, but there's that scene where they push the pin into the doll, and then all of a sudden it just cuts, and you see Paul standing up with the spear in his hand over her limp body. And I was just like, holy crap. I did not see that coming at all. And then he picks her up and walks backwards into the water while that same creepy guy from the field is there. And that just, because I was not expecting the scene to be executed that way. Like, you kind of got the idea he's probably going to go attack her, or something bad's about to happen, or try to drag her back into the compound or whatever. But the fact that he ended up being the one that killed her, and almost seemingly like in a trance, like he became controlled by the magic or whatever. That really caught my attention, and was, I thought, just a awesome turn from a horror perspective.
Yeah. I mean, it was the unexpected twist that came, that you're just like, holy shnikes, like this dude, like.
Well, and we're not really used to twists in these older movies, other than Dr. Caligari, I guess, but that was a German independent silent film, so you can't really call that like a mainstream
right
influence from the time. So
yeah. I mean, I think it's just like it kind of touched base on it a couple times. Like I can't remember the other guy's name who passed out when they were getting drinks, but anyway,
Wesley?
Like he comes and like talks to Paul, like they're just kind of like chatting, and he's basically saying, like, you fall out of love with one, fall in love with the other, or something to that effect. And so you kind of tell, like, something, strange is going on a little bit early on, and then, but that's it, and the next thing you know, it's like, what the hell? Like, who, why, like, also, why would you pay to fly this nurse all the way out here if that's just going to be the end goal anyways, man? Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of makes you wonder, was it really him that was cursed the whole time or something? So
that's a good point. Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, the ending was a big twist, and it was really abrupt, and then it just kind of stopped. And I love that for the ending of a horror movie. You didn't have that resolution where everybody made it out okay in the end. The main people escaped, and everyone now thinks about this horrific thing that happened, but they are no longer in danger. No, it just got real dark and stayed that way. Yeah. And that's what I want from a horror movie.
Yeah.
It's just like my life.
Same.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.